Jesus Christ to come out of her.
By the waters of Babylon, we lay down and wept for thee, Zion.
Hello, everyone. We're getting pretty close to Halloween now. So, because Halloween's coming up, I thought, why not celebrate it the only way an ex-Jehovah's Witness truly can? And that's by talking about demon stories. Yeah, slightly different from ghost stories. Because demon stories are real, right? Because they're told by Jehovah's Witnesses. And Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't lie, do they? The Watchtower concurs that demons are in fact very real. You know, I'm going to turn the lights off. I think it's a little distracting. So one day, this brother picks up a globe from a yard sale. It was a very old, used globe. It had a wooden stand. And if you would look up such a globe on the internet to purchase, it would run you a high amount of money. This was a very nice top-of-the-line globe. Not only that, it was an antique. It was one of a kind. And this brother found it at a yard sale and took it home. Well, one night, you see, this brother had given it to his son. It was a present to his son. It was going to help him with his school. Well, one night, while everyone was sleeping, the son of this brother woke up. He was disturbed by something. He heard a voice. And when he looked up, this globe that had no power cords or batteries or anything of the sort was glowing. It was lit up like a lamp. And behind the glow of this lamp was a face. And it began to speak to this brother's son. Well, this child ran out screaming to his father. The globe. It's alive. It's talking. It's on fire. Well, as any good Jehovah's Witness father would do, he ran in, grabbed the globe, ran outside, tossed it in the yard, and as the story goes, it shattered into a million pieces. Now, stories like these, they're quite ridiculous, aren't they? To anyone with half a brain. But when you're a child, these stories tend to carry a little more weight. When you're young, you want to believe the things that people are telling you are true. You trust people, especially people like your parents, people like the elders in your congregation. Their words carry a little more weight, especially at a tender age. I remember very clearly the first time my mother told me that demons were real. I was only about 6 or 7 years old. And you see, my mom, she would babysit um, this brother's kid, after school because his father worked late. So after school, we would take him over to our house, and that's where he'd stay until his father got off work. Well, this was the very kid who told the story at the beginning of this. And, that story might not have affected me so bad if it weren't for the fact that earlier in that day, my mother told me that demons were real, that they actually possess people and things, objects. They frighten and attack God's people. Now, this was the same person who had instructed me about everything in life that I learned up until this point. See, the situation was, we drove past this mansion in the town that I lived in. It was kind of a landmark building. Everybody knew it. Sometimes they rented it out to the public. And we passed this mansion, and this kid that my mom had been babysitting, he says, that mansion is haunted. And being a child who went to school and saw all the kids' television programs that told and reassured kids that ghosts aren't real, that's only in your imagination. Ghosts aren't real. So there's no such thing as ghosts. Well, that's how I responded. I told this kid, I said, What are you talking about? There's no such thing as ghosts. That's your imagination. Well, no sooner did I say that my mom, who was driving us past this mansion, she turns and she says, well, actually, demons are real. Which, demons are way worse, right? My mom legitimized these things to me, and it shattered my world. The best part of it is, and you're going to love this, the best part of it is, that very night, I was scheduled to go to a slumber party. Do you know what kids do at slumber parties? So there I was, at a slumber party at 6 years old, hearing not just ghost stories, but Jehovah's Witnesses' version of ghost stories, demon stories, which, as I mentioned earlier, are way worse because your parents tell you that they're absolutely real. The same people who told you how gravity works, why it rains, they tell you that demons are real. And I'm sitting there hearing these stories about trolls. Do you remember the trolls, the little dolls? Those were, of course, always demonized, weren't they? Trolls, Smurfs, a mirror. Oh, there were many versions of basically the same story. Unsuspecting Jehovah's Witness brings home something worldly. Next thing you know, things go bump in the night. I did not fall asleep that night. I remember shaking. I remember crying to Jehovah all night long. For the first of many nights, actually. I trembled and cried to Jehovah to keep the demons away. And that was always the safeguard. See, apparently demons couldn't handle the name Jehovah somehow. So you find yourself chanting over and over and over again the name Jehovah. Jehovah, please. Jehovah, please. Please. Don't let the demons come. Keep the demons away. I wasn't allowed to go to anyone's house for years after this event. They were afraid, my parents. They thought if I went to anyone else's house, I'd hear more demon stories. And they were exhausted by my countless interruptions of their sleep, knocking on the door. I can't sleep. The demons. I'm scared. So some nights, eventually, I got better. They were afraid that if I went to anyone's house, any of my friends' house again for a sleepover, that they would tell more demon stories, and it would start all over again. Television shows, movies, if anything even slightly depicted a spiritual entity, I freaked out, and it started all over again. I was always afraid of demons from that moment on. As an adult, it got easier. You know, you just try not to think about it. Just hope for the best, you know. But there would be those nights when you watched a movie you knew you shouldn't. Something spiritistic was displayed. And then you lay awake at night, watching the shadows and listening. It wasn't until I learned the truth about the Jehovah's Witnesses that I ever truly let go of and completely lost my fear of demons and demon possession. It's funny what religion will do for you. I'm going to recount a few of the personal demon encounters that I had as a child. Looking back, I've read a lot of things. And I've done a lot of research into the subject. I don't know if I believe in demons anymore. There could be some phenomena in this world. People tend to see and hear strange things. I'm not going to call them all crazy, but it is my own personal opinion that as a child, your brain is much more susceptible to suggestion. And I think my fear as a young child caused me to see and hear a lot of things that just simply weren't there, didn't really happen. But there is that portion of my mind that always wonders, what if it was something? I have a very uniquely Jehovah's Witness demon story. I was still very young. I'd say maybe I was 9 years old. And I was asleep in my bed. We had a bunk bed at the time. I grew up in a very full house of siblings. And so I was on the bottom bunk and resting. And I heard footsteps, not just footsteps, but you know, as a Jehovah's Witness, the distinct sound that dress shoes make on wood floor. You know, that clop, clop, clop sound? Well, I heard it. As I'd heard it a million times before, it sounded like my brother's shoes. He was walking around one morning, and I hear him try to stir my other brother, from the top bunk. And I hear him say, "Wake up. Come on. It's time to go out in service." And I didn't think anything of it because I'd heard this sort of thing before in the past. No big deal. Why is that weird? So I kind of let myself drift back to sleep until I realized that it was the middle of the week and both of my brothers were still in school. I got up and searched for my brothers, and they were gone. Later that day, I asked where they had been, and of course they told me at school. So, did I hear that? Now, I know the difference between a dream and reality, people. I've had very realistic dreams, but I always knew they were dreams. This was not a dream. I heard the footsteps, and I heard my brother's voice. One of the most frightening demon stories that I have from my own personal life was very shortly after that first one. One morning, in that time, in that space between sleeping and waking up, I saw a white image, a blurry, faded white image of the roots of grass, which hopefully you all know what I'm talking about. If you go outside and you get a handful of grass and you pull it out of the dirt, underneath actually has roots, and it's a very chaotic, messy root system. I saw this on a field of white, just all white. And I heard a voice say, "Brian, somebody's here for you." Just like that. Now, when I woke up, you see, it sounded a lot like my father's voice, only slightly different. But I was convinced that it must have been my father. So I got up and I ran around the house looking for my father, but no one was home. You see, I was homeschooled for a long time when I was a child. And that morning, I was completely alone. I ran to the door because I was so certain my father had just told me that someone was here for me. I opened the door and I looked out to the driveway. There's nobody there. There was no cars, no one. No one in the whole house. But I had heard what I thought was my father's voice say, "Brian, somebody's here for you." Now, that may not sound all that scary on its own, but a couple of years ago, somebody made me think of this encounter that I had, or this dream, whatever you want to call it. And remember when I told you that I thought it sounded like my father, only slightly different? The scary part about what I'm telling you is that when I thought back to that time, because I haven't thought about this thing, I hadn't thought about it in like 10 years or more. When I thought back and thought about the voice that was talking to me, I realized that it was not my father's voice that I had heard, but it was my voice as an adult. And every time I say it to this day, it is an exact match of what I heard when I was like 8 or 9 years old in my house all by myself. There are unexplainable things in this reality, brothers and sisters. But there is some comfort. There is some hope. if there are demons, they don't give a damn that you're a Jehovah's Witness. The house I grew up in as a child I always claimed was extremely haunted. I had a lot of dark, strange memories in that house. Me and my friend, one time. See, we weren't allowed to go into my closet for some reason. Something that I've meant to ask my father about, but I never remember to. One time, my friend opened the closet door just to see why we weren't allowed to go in there. And the instant he did, from across the house, this is a large house, mind you, from across the house we hear the booming shout of my father say, "Who opened the closet door?" We still laugh about it to this day, even though we can't really explain it. So don't worry, brothers and sisters. By liberating you from the Jehovah's Witness organization and the untruths and the lies and the doctrines, I'm also liberating you from the idea that demons are real. I'm liberating you from the constant fear and terror that they have installed in you from a very young and tender age. Feels good, doesn't it? Since then, I've done a lot of research and exploration onto the subject. And in my adult life, sadly, I have not encountered anything to make me believe that ghosts or demons or anything of that nature are real. Sorry, sadly. You know, it's funny. Now, I have such freedom. I can watch any scary movie I want to and get the most beautiful night's sleep after. Because I just don't believe in that crap anymore, man. It was all lies. All of it. Every single bit of it was a lie, guys. So, there is some comfort in being disfellowshipped and disowned by your friends and family. At least, you can sleep well at night.